YouTube bound community, Beach Boys fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens. We are joined here today by David Beard of ESQ, Endless Summer Quarterly, the best Beach Boys fanzine out there, guys. How's it going, man?
Good. It may be the only.
I think it's the only one left.
It's funny you say that. I just had out, we're going to be talking about the 85 album, but I just had that twofer out yesterday, and I was looking in the booklet of this thing, because it comes with the Keeping the Summer Alive album. And there's a handful of fan clubs and fan publications listed,
Yeah.
and I think every one of them is defunct except ESQ that's listed in this booklet. And
I
it's
mean, there's been some
crazy.
websites that I used to go to that don't exist anymore either. It's just like it's weird how things change like that. That two for CD is extremely hard to find now.
Really?
Very hard oh my God, they go for like $40 online, sometimes
Oh.
more. Yeah. Fun fact. Yeah,
It's a
as
good.
David said there, what was that?
I said it was good. It's a good thing to have grown up, and bought these in real time. What was this release? 2000, 2001 ish.
Yeah, around there, 2001, 2000,
I
yeah,
can't
for
believe
that
the
one.
CD is 20 plus years old.
I
I,
feel like those things just came. Which is funny because those albums haven't been reissued in a long time. Anyways,
yeah,
today we're going to talk about the Beach Boys 1985 album, or self-titled, if you want to go correct about it. An absolutely fascinating album in their discography, crucial to their catalog, if you will, and a very important album in their story. So, David, let's talk about what led up to this album, because between Keeping the Summer Alive and the self-titled album, number one, it was the longest break between studio albums, and number two, a lot happened. So, you were kind of there at that time, or getting into the boys at that point. Like, what was it like as a fan in those days?
it was very kind of. I just remember it being a little strange because this thing that I'm thinking about that seemed odd. Well, I remember I was at my cousin's house in Pennsylvania, and we were going through the back of the house to the front or through the kitchen or something, and it must have been July 4th because I stopped and looked at the TV. And this must have been 1980 or 81 because Dennis was in the group, and it was the July 4th concert. So it wasn't the James Watt deal because Wayne Newton did that one, and then they came back
Yeah,
the following year in '84. So
yeah.
this was like 80, 81, and I remember stopping and looking at the TV and thinking to myself, and knowing who the Beach Boys were, and thinking to myself, that was awful.
Jeez.
I just remember watching it and thinking, boy, something doesn't sound. It just there was.
Yeah.
I don't know and I'm for better or worse. I don't remember exactly what I thought was so bad. I just remember looking at the television and standing there long enough to go through at least two songs,
Yeah.
well-known songs, and thinking to myself, what's going on? Why do they sound so bad or off or whatever it was? It just
Yeah.
I was happy to continue my day. There was nothing about it that made me want to stay in front of the television. And that's all I remember about it.
Wow.
So that's what I remember about that. I remember that I was taking guitar lessons in 1980 in the back of a music store, and um, statutes of limitations apply. Um, I was waiting for the guitar teacher, so it was like right as the store closed. It was a really small, it's like a Radio Shack, but it wasn't Radio Shack, but it was like a Radio Shack.
Yeah, yeah.
And so the guitar teacher was in the back finishing up with the student before me, and the place was closed. So I was waiting out in the main area with the doors locked and everything. And I
Yeah.
came across, I was looking in the cassette bin. And back in those days, some stores, depending on what type of store you'd be in, like if it was an actual music store, typically they would have cassettes. They got fancy and they would put them in like secure things that had like alarms that would go off when you go through the
Yeah.
try
The
to
long plastic thing, and
not
yeah.
not in this place. And
Okay.
there was a like a bin, like a square bin of cassettes just sitting in there, and I went,
Yeah.
oh, Beach Boys, and it was the "Keeping the Summer Alive" cassette, and I stuck
Awesome.
it. I don't know if I put it in my pocket or what I did, but I absconded off with the uh, "Keeping the Summer Alive," and I remember liking "Some of Your Love" because that song reminded me of, to my ears, that was the song that was most like the material that I knew by them off of the
Yeah.
Best of the Beach Boys. Because I think the only other thing I had by that time was the Best of the Beach. I believe I'm not 100% about that, but I know I had Best of the Beach Boys, and "Some of Your Love" was the one song that really reminded me or sounded like those other songs like "Catch a Wave" or "Help Me Rhonda" or "Little Deuce Coupe" or
Yeah.
whatever. Just kind of a straightforward 3-4 time Beach Boys song.
Good
And
pop song. Good
yeah,
vocals.
so,
Yeah.
and it was about school,
Yeah.
and again, it's going to be like a "Be True to Your School" type of song. So that was the one I remember immediately liking. And then
Yeah.
the
Love
other
that song.
songs kind of grew on me over to many, many years. I really do like that album now, but at the time,
Yeah.
the one that stood out was "Some of Your Love."
Yeah. That's such a good song. And those background vocals definitely are reminiscent of the 60s stuff. They always sound nostalgic when they're singing about Kiss Me Baby, Hold Me Tight, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, that's really cool to contextualize that kind of stuff. So I mean, in that time frame, like, do you remember hearing about Dennis Wilson passing away? Do you remember hearing about that on TV, or what was that like when that happened?
What I remember about Dennis is, if I'm, and I believe I'm remembering this correctly, I think that July 4th show, whether it had been 80 or 81 that I saw when I stopped and looked at the TV, I think he was the one that was causing my discontent.
Was it like a
From
vocal
from
thing, or
from
did
from
he
the
play
from
it?
the tightness of what was being executed.
Okay.
Because if a
Yeah.
drum, and anyone, I this is true for any group. If you're performing live and the drummer isn't holding down the foundation of what you're doing,
Yeah.
it does not sound right.
As
If
a
the
drummer,
drummer if the
you
drummer
know,
is locked in, anybody else can mess up, and it's not
right,
as noticeable because
right.
the drummer is holding it down.
You're the
And
heartbeat.
so I think that's what I noticed, was that the not that the drumming was lousy, but
Yeah.
something was off. And I didn't know enough about the group to think, oh, Dennis is screwing up or anything like that.
Yeah.
I just remember it being, I think it was like, again, really well-known songs that you just like, Surfing USA or something like that, just a well-known song, and
Yeah.
it wasn't being. I thought maybe the TV was something wrong with the TV, like the
Yeah.
speaker. There's something wrong with this. So what I was seeing, and I had not, I'm trying to remember my first concert. My first concert was in, I believe, June of '83, and I would have to get John
Wow.
Stebbins and Ian Rustin's great uh, Beach Boys book they did together, the concert book.
Yeah. Got it
The
up there.
show,
Yeah.
the show that I saw is in that book, and I'm pretty sure it was
Oh
June of
man.
'83 at um, the soccer stadium here in Charlotte. I think they were. I can't remember. I've got the book right here on the floor next to me. But uh,
Yeah.
I remember when the book was published, my buddy had come over to watch a football game with me, and he was at that show with me. And I said, "Wait, let me go get this new book I got." And I
Yeah.
opened it up, and we both looked, and I said, "This is it," because I think it was called Memorial Stadium or something, but it was a soccer place in downtown Charlotte,
Yeah.
and I was expecting to see Dennis. I was, because it was 1983, it was June 1983.
Yeah.
So when we went to the show, it was actually with my youth group, my church youth group that went, and I think I've mentioned this before. It was my youth minister who got me into them. So this was
Right.
a big deal.
That's
We were
awesome.
going to see the
Yeah.
Beach Boys, and I was the guy. I was the Google in the group that
Yeah.
people were asking me who's that? Who's this guy?
Yeah.
And I remember about that show, and it wasn't just that show in particular, but that tour. And I don't know if, I'm pretty sure they did it beyond that tour, but they had like a wave tapestry that was attached to the front of the stage that went all
Cool.
the way down to the ground. So it wasn't
Awesome.
straight down. It was like pulled out like a wave. It came
That's
way
so
out in front
cool.
of the stage, and it looked like so it was an actual wave on a tapestry that came from the stage. So it was a neat stage design.
Yeah.
And I remember at that particular show, Mike and Bruce still do it to this day, I think, where they get in the little chorus line and they step, step,
The
step,
kick
kick,
thing.
step,
Yeah.
step. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Bruce kicked the keyboard, or somebody kicked the keyboard, and it ended up falling off the front of the stage, but it was still hanging by the cord.
Jeez.
So some roadie or somebody, maybe it was Bruce, somebody had to detach the keyboard so it could slide slowly down the wave tapestry. And then they went around, picked up the keyboard, took it back up the stage, and reconnected it. So I remembered that. It was so weird. But Dennis was not there, and I didn't know what, I'd not been to a Beach Boys show before. So this was my first one. And I think I'm getting this right. I believe they came out in cars, like convertibles, like
I've seen that on YouTube before. Yeah.
where somebody's driving them, but they're like sitting in the back seat, and they
Yeah.
come out one by one, and they're
Yeah.
I don't know if they were 2x2 or anything, but Brian was not there and Dennis was not there. And again, I did not know. Oh, Dennis isn't here because he's having drugs or alcohol, but none of that. I
Right.
didn't know any of that.
Right. Right.
I think maybe I had seen their Today, was it, no, Good Morning America appearance. I think I had seen that.
Yeah.
Where Dennis can barely keep his head up.
Yeah.
And I just took it, maybe he was up late or,
Yeah. 8 o'clock in the morning. He's a rock
8
star.
o'clock in the morning. And yeah, he's a rock star. He's
Yeah.
not, rock stars are
He's
not
not
made for
waking
8 a.m. programs.
Right. 3 o'clock
Um,
p.m. No problem.
Yeah. I'll see you at 3. Yeah. So I had seen a little bit peripherally. So I just did not know again, whatever books were out at that time, I think I had them.
Yeah.
As I told you before, as I was getting into the Beach Boys and discovering more about the Beach Boys, by the time you get to the mid 80s, and Dennis was gone by that point, I just wanted to know more about Smile because of Malcolm Leo's An American Band video.
Yeah.
So, documentary. So Dennis was he it didn't go any deeper, I don't think, than he was one of the Wilson brothers in terms
Okay.
of what I considered or thought about or anything like that. I knew he was one of the Wilson brothers. I didn't have his solo album. I was not even aware of it at that time.
Yeah. Sure.
So I didn't have any level of deep appreciation of who Dennis Wilson was. So certainly, as the years went by, I did. But
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
time, no idea. Just other than even the 1983 promo photo, which I'm pretty sure I had seen by that point somewhere in some publication or newspaper or whatever, where he's just he's got the real short hair. The rest of them are smiling and look wonderful.
Yeah.
But the beard. He's clean shaven. He's got short hair.
Right.
And he's just he looks like
Yeah.
he's barely holding his head up.
I know.
And that was my impression of him
Yeah.
because of that photo. And I don't remember what source I had seen it. And then, of course, he drowns. And then the People magazine, I have that People magazine issue with him on the front. He does,
Right.
that's the great 1960s photo of him on drums. They're all wearing the yellow shirts. And then they got the superimposed older photo of him, and he just doesn't look good. So all I know is from the article.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
and that he drowned, and how bizarre it was the way that it happened, that he used to have a boat called the Harmony that was at that slip. And so he decided, and he had a friend now at that slip, and he decided to dive in for all the shit that he threw off the boat. And he actually came up with a photo of him and Karen Lamb from all those years ago, which is insane to me.
It's like he knew where it was.
Yeah, I know. It's just he goes diving in December water, so even though it's LA, it still had to be
So cold. Yeah.
but it's Dennis, so
Yeah,
So nobody's that concerned about it. But I guess from what I understand, he came up and he hit his head or something, and then he fell
yeah,
back down.
right.
But so I didn't really have an impression of Dennis because I had, like I said, I maybe some songs by them, Best of the Beach Boys, Catch a Wave, he sang. I was
Yeah,
still working on learning and differentiating who was singing what at that time in my life.
yeah.
So when Keeping the Summer Alive comes out, there's no Dennis vocals.
He's not even on the album. Yeah, well, except for
I think he plays drums on what was the not Come Go With Me. What was the School Days? I think
Cool Days. He
I
might be on that one.
I see. It seems to me he played drums on something that they kept the drums on.
I think vocally he's on Endless Harmony.
Okay.
On the tagline, I think he's on
Yeah,
that.
they sing "God Bless America."
That's it, though. Yeah,
Okay.
he's
Okay.
barely on that album. Yeah,
Yeah. So he's not there, and I didn't have again at that point in my life. I did not have the LA album yet. I had not
yeah,
bought. I had told you before that my youth minister turned me on to the 10 Years of Harmony. But again, that was still a couple years down the road. I had not. I just had not. My impression of who Dennis was he was the drummer.
right.
The guy who the July 4th show who just wasn't holding it down.
Yeah,
So that was the extent of whatever it was. And I again back on that July 4th concert, the only thought I had was this isn't very good. It's not very entertaining. That they're not tight. And
yeah,
again, without any type of musical acumen or anything, that was just the impression of young 14 or 15-year-old, like, I got better things to do.
right,
I
right.
got I'm gonna go outside and play and do
Yeah,
whatever. And I've looked back at footage of that on YouTube, and it's not very good.
yeah.
It's not one of their better outings to be playing in front of that many people. Um, you know,
I mean, at that era of '81, was Carl on stage with him at that point? Because he had left the band to
I
do
think
solo things for a couple of
I think
years.
so. Well, and Jerry Schilling will be the first to clarify that. I've written this just almost the way that you just said it,
Yeah,
and I think I've heard many people over the years say it just similarly to the way that you said it. And that is Jerry Schilling is quick to point out that Carl did not leave the Beach Boys to pursue a solo career. Jerry has said that Carl wanted to, and I'm only kind of paraphrasing the message, I'm not repeating what Jerry said.
yeah,
Carl wanted to express himself musically. So he started working on a solo album while he was a Beach Boy. He did that. He got a 2 record deal with
yeah.
well, it was part of the Caribou thing.
Yeah, CBS umbrella,
Right,
Caribou. Yeah,
right. Yeah, from dating back to Dennis's solo album.
yeah, right.
And um, he, so again, through my understanding of what Jerry has explained to me, Carl did the first solo album as a Beach Boy. Like he recorded it, he was still a Beach Boy. And it wasn't really until the lack of, and now this is no longer Jerry, this is me saying these things.
Yeah,
Um, that from what I take from it is the lack of desire to show up and rehearse, the lack of desire to work on new
right,
material, the work,
right.
just the overall lack of desire, kind of phoning it in, showing up to take the stage, but that's kind of it. Not a creative. Let's kind of put ourselves together, which was very important to Carl.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Yeah, I
and
mean, I remember reading a quote somewhere, and I'm gonna paraphrase this as well. He was basically like, until the Beach Boys care about 1981 just as much as they cared about 1961, I'm gonna do
that,
this.
that that's a huge, and I think that was in the
Yeah,
press release.
I think it was, and like
Yeah, that's
when I said he was out of the band, I should have said out of the live band because I'm sure you don't quit the Beach Boys, but like, um, it's fascinating to see because I love those albums, and his voice was made for that '80s rock radio element. He's perfect for it.
yeah.
So if they could have done albums like that as the Beach Boys, they would have had hits on their hands with no problem. With that name, with that kind of power, like it could have worked so well.
I
Um,
Yeah, I
But you're
think.
right.
I'm sorry.
No, no, you're right. Like who was talking about how the guys just didn't want to rehearse and they were just doing the same songs over and over and over again, and it was going nowhere. It would drive anybody nuts. You're on tour 300 days a year, playing the same 24 songs over and over again. And when he came back, they started playing different songs and they started to really rehearse and shake it up a little bit.
Yeah,
So
no, I don't know how much of it was the same material. I don't know if that, because one of the other great misconceptions or myths that has been exaggerated beyond comprehension over the years is that the reason they became a touring hit machine was because all of Mike Love.
no, yeah,
And that
no,
is the furthest thing from the
no.
truth. The truth,
Correct. Yes, not the.
as told to me directly by Jimmy Gershio.
Oh wow.
Okay. This is the interview that I did with Jim for the Dennis Wilson Pacific Ocean Blue Bamboo released by Sony Legacy that I worked on with John Stebbins back in
Yeah.
'07, '08. Jimmy told me what happened was the group was, and this goes all the way back to 73, 74-ish. The group were not selling out.
Right.
And they couldn't figure out among them why that was. And so they had a group meeting. Now, I don't know when I hear the term group meeting, I don't know if Jim is, because Jim wasn't there for it. So I don't know if it was
Right.
a corporate meeting or if it was just the band sitting around together going, what do we do?
What do we do? Yeah.
But they agreed as a group that they obviously needed to change something. They just didn't know what they needed to change to start selling out again.
Right.
To start selling all the tickets, every venue, so because they were playing high schools and they couldn't fill them up.
Colleges. Yeah,
I
you're
know
right.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe not high schools, but they were doing
Kids'
smaller
birthday parties.
venues.
Yeah.
Yeah, a kindergarten,
Apartment clothes. Yeah.
an apartment complex. Nobody would care. But they were having trouble selling out even smaller venues. And
Yeah.
so as a group, as a collective whole, they voted amongst themselves, we need to talk to somebody to help us understand what we should look at, what we should consider, how should we change our shows. And in that discussion, it was voted, let's ask Jim Gershio. And they all agreed to that. All of them.
Yeah.
Al, Mike, Carl, Dennis. Now, probably not Brian, because Brian had given his vote to Carl. So anything Carl was at that time in their careers, Dennis just said, Carl, you can vote for whatever you want to do, and that's going to be fine with me. And so they all agreed that they would ask Jimmy Gershio for his advice, and he was up at Caribou. So Dennis, the group vote was yes, let's get Jimmy involved. And then Dennis was the one. So see, as I learned years later, how vital and important Dennis's role within the group was. Dennis is then the one who goes up to Caribou. He's the one who sits down with Jimmy Gershio and says, Jimmy, tells him what's going on. We all voted. I'm here to talk to you. Can you help us change? Can you help us do whatever we need to do so that we can start playing bigger venues again and selling out, to bigger audiences.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I can't really offer you just blind advice. I'll come and see some of your shows. And then once I see some of your shows, I'll just tell you what I think and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
I said, okay. So Gershio goes and watches some of their shows. I don't know how many, but it wasn't that many. And then he comes to them and he says, well, first of all, you got to get rid of your biggest hits medley. You have a car medley and a surf medley. You have to play those songs.
Play the actual song, right?
You can't just medley them. People who are coming to see your shows are expecting to hear those songs.
Right.
So no, anybody who thinks otherwise, Mike Love is not responsible for them becoming a traveling jukebox. The entire band, plus Jimmy Gershio, on his advice, that's how they became a traveling jukebox. Gershio says, listen, if you want to sell out tickets, you got to play the songs people are coming to hear. So then, within a year's time, they're touring with Chicago, because Gershio was managing Chicago. They're opening for Chicago, and they're selling out everywhere they go.
Right.
So
Right.
Bershow's advice was right on the money. And
Yeah.
and at the time, lo and behold, they end up with Endless Summer coming out to kind of
Perfect timing.
happily coincide with that timing of bringing those things together.
Yeah.
So that it was completely fruitious for all involved. And
Yeah.
again, I just want to reiterate this. This was not a Mike Love thing. This was a Mike
Right.
Love, Carl Wilson, Dennis Wilson, Al Jardine thing. This was a
Yeah.
Beach Boys group decision.
Right.
Okay. And they couldn't have been happier by 75 because they were once again the top. They were at the
I
top
mean,
again. Everybody knew who they
yeah,
were again.
they were a massive concert draw. I mean, when they worked with Jack Riley in the early 70s, he was the one who was like, look, play your deeper, newer cuts,
Yeah,
play this stuff, drop some of the surfs. And it worked for that time. But like you said, like they weren't having humongous shows. They're doing all right. But,
yeah,
when you have an album like Endless Summer and you want to hear all those great songs, and you know that they're going to be a hit every night. It's a guaranteed audience is going to cheer and sing along. How do you say no to that? And it's
that's
a part of your history. So it's not taken away from what they were building. It's just changing it up, which they had done every handful of years up to that point anyway.
that's right.
So it was a natural progression. But yeah, you get to those shows in the mid '70s, and they become the biggest touring band in the world. I mean, it was, you know,
That's right.
they were all done together.
And at no time within that decision were they thinking, this is all we're going to do ever again. There
No,
was never that foresight. There
no,
was never, this is who we are. We are defined by, there was never that. But if you look at any sustained legacy group, they all kind of dialed into that reality at some point if they didn't do it right away. Like the Eagles knew it.
yeah,
Glenn Fry and Don Henley recognized from the very beginning, these are our popular songs. These are why people are here. And that's why they had their group turmoil, is the other members didn't want to keep doing it. No, 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 no.
and like
You're singing take it to the limit tonight, whether you like
yeah,
it or not, because
yeah.
that's why they paid their money to come and sit here and watch you.
And you got to remember too, like for some people, that might be the only time they see that band live. That might be the
Right.
one show, and they want to hear all their favorite songs and go home happy. You
Yeah.
know, I understand if you've seen the band 100 times, you're gonna want to hear something different. I get it, but for most people, you save up your ticket, go see the Beach Boys the one time you're gonna see them, and you're good. Um, so I mean, when I said before, like Carl changing the set list up, I know they added like All Summer Long, they added a few other ones that they hadn't really touched on, but were still big songs for them. In the early '80s when he came back. Um, so I mean, you were around at that time. Were you aware of Carl even having a solo album or two at that time?
I remember seeing his first solo album, but I don't
Yeah,
remember where I saw it. The music that I ended up first being exposed to as I got deeper into who the Beach Boys were, and this is all before what we talked on before. Remember, I had Best of the Beach Boys. My youth minister tells me, who he just tried to call me, by the way. I looked down, I saw his name, I thought, oh, he must know I'm talking about him.
serendipitous. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
I have the Best of the Beach Boys. I'm aware of 10 Years of Harmony, but I'm not really into it. I think by then maybe I have Endless Summer on cassette. I now have quick sleight of hand, keeping Summer Alive cassette. Uh, I don't know what else I had, but at this point, we're into the early 80s, and I am going to Radio Shack because whether it was it must have been newspaper ads.
yeah.
Because I knew that material that had the Beach Boys name on it and Mike Love's name on it and Dean from Jan and Dean's name on it. And I told you
That,
before,
that tape, yeah,
I discovered the whole genre, even though I had Best of the Beach Boys, I discovered the genre more, exposed to it through the Jan and Dean TV movie Dead Man's Curve.
right,
So
right,
anything
right.
that had Jan and Dean, I was as interested in Jan and Dean as I was the Beach Boys at that
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah,
And, so I was going to Radio Shack and buying all the Tandy stuff, the realistic
yeah,
Tandy stuff. So
yeah, yeah,
the Mike and Dean Rock and Roll City, the Jan and we talked about this before. The one that was the Jan and Dean and Beach Boys on it was a cassette and vinyl.
yep,
And that
yep.
was a great album for me to have because I was like, oh, this is like the best of both of them. This is
Got them
fantastic.
both. Perfect. Yeah,
And so that was my slow exposure to them. And then, so by the time, and I remember them, I remember the, I remember the movie Up the Creek because I'm pretty darn sure I saw it in theaters. I'm not 100% sure, but I know, yeah, I know that I saw that because I was a fan of Tim Matheson because he had been in Animal House, and well, and Stephen First, who's also in that
Mhm.
Up the Creek, he was also in Animal House. He was one of the new uh, candidates that they were bringing into
Oh,
the dorm with
yeah, yeah.
the guy who ended up playing Mozart, the
Right.
other actor.
I
Um,
got everything.
he goes to Up the Creek. The other guy goes to Mozart. Go figure. Um, but so this everybody, and I tell you, in the new edition of Endless Summer Quarterly that's coming out, um, it everyone, who talks about this? It actually may be in the fall edition because it's a 2-volume set.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember correctly. So I do know this, and I just off the top of my head, I'm not remembering who said it, but the idea was the Beach Boys agreed to be on the song "Chasing the Sky." It was written by Randy Bishop, not Stephen Bishop, who appeared in Animal House, not the same guy. Stephen Bishop did On and other songs like that. And if you're not
Yeah.
sure who Stephen Bishop is in Animal House, he's the guy on the stairs playing the guitar until John
Oh,
Belushi comes and takes the guitar out of his hands and
yeah,
smashes it. That's Stephen
yeah,
Bishop. But Randy Bishop, no relation, is the guy
yeah,
who wrote half the material for the Up the Creek soundtrack, including the title track he wrote with Cheap Trick's Rick Nielsen. Uh,
yeah.
so he wrote Up the Creek, and I am going to be doing a Zoom with Randy Bishop about that experience.
Oh, no way.
So
That's awesome.
that'll be in the next fall edition. So this is so just for anyone who's not who is a subscriber to ESQ or is not a subscriber to ESQ. In my our first interview, and I talked about how long I've been doing it, almost 30 years,
Yeah.
and I find it interesting that in the entire duration of my publishing the magazine, I've never ever done I've done like two Smile editions back to back. Like, and one was like Smile, Brian Wilson Presents Smile 2004, followed by Smile 1967,
Yeah.
decades apart. But they weren't really 1 volume and 2 volume. And then another time when they did the Hawthorne landmark event in 2005, and I was there.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was, I did the 2005 issue with the photos from that event, followed by what I called Hawthorne 1960, where I had a original 1960 Hawthorne yearbook, and I interviewed Brian about. I had the yearbook and sat with him and interviewed him. That was amazing.
Unbelievable.
Um,
That's cool.
so, but that's decades apart. Those aren't so. For the first time ever in ESQ's existence, I'm doing this current summer edition, which has interviews with Jerry Schilling, which is kind of a short introductory interview that kind of sets the stage for what we're talking about now, which is what was going on in the Beach Boys' careers that led to the '85 album and their emotional frame of reference
Yeah.
going into because Dennis had passed. And then it's followed by a really lengthy, in-depth interview with the album's producer, Steve Levine. And for those who may not know Steve Levine's name or what he's known for, he's really, his main thing is he was the producer for Culture Club and all their hits. Many other groups, but those, if you just needed a quick reference, I would say
Yeah.
any song by Culture Club that you know from the 80s, Steve produced it. And
Yeah.
if you know the '85 album, well, Steve produced it. And so that's Steve Levine's work, and that's how he came into the picture. So Steve that's a very long interview, and he tells me all the background minutia leading up to the recording sessions. He then
Cool.
tells me stories about we go song by song. So he's got like a little story or anecdote about every little song, how Stevie Wonder came in, how Boy George added a song, all the minutia. And then
So cool. Oh my
and
God.
then we end the edition. Oh, and then there's kind of a day in the life, fly on the wall article from Andrew Doe, everyone's favorite curmudgeon. And so he was there in the studio in I want to say May of '85. Maybe it was March of
Wow.
'85. And he was in the studio at Westlake because he was visiting California, and he somehow, I'll let the story speak for itself when the subscribers get it. But so
Yeah.
and then the new edition ends with a wonderful complete sessionography from Craig Slowinski and his team, which always makes every edition where they contribute a sessionography, it just makes it so
It's
much better because it's just like
it's
the
perfect.
perfect. It's
Yeah.
like you put on the album and you can just dig in. And
Follow along. Yeah.
um, so now, normally, what I've done in the past with sessionography is what I do is I try to put the interview content below, and then have the sessionography kind of underneath, but
Travel
not
along with
this
it.
time. I have it at the back, just in its
Cool.
own section. I kind of did
Cool.
that with the Carl and the Passions issue, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So now I did a long Zoom with Jeffrey Foskett, and
Cool.
I'm not finished. I just got done transcribing that last night, and it just there's some follow up I'll need with him, and so that he talks about coming into the band in that period, all the
Yes.
different recordings he was involved with, because in '84, before they or late '83, '84, even before they got to the '85 album, and those sessions primarily, not completely, but primarily took place in from June of '84 through the rest of the year, or July
Yeah.
'84 through the rest of the year, and then a little bit
Right.
trickled into '85.
Yeah.
But they had recorded, we just showed everyone Up the Creek. They recorded Chasing the Sky for that, but they also had recorded East Meets West with
Yeah.
Frankie Valli and whatever the other three seasons were at the time. But it's not the originals, but it
Yeah.
was written and produced by Bob Gaudio, who
Right.
was the guy back in the day with
He was
Frankie Valli.
incredible. Incredible
Incredible,
producer. Yeah.
just one of the true greats in the music industry, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
Not just a producer, but a songwriter. I mean, just
Did
again, it's
everything.
the same thing he did, and
Yeah.
and he was smart enough from day one when he walked into the Four Seasons situation and said, "I'm going to get ancillary this, and this," and he knew.
Yeah.
And Tommy couldn't take advantage of him, which is
Yeah.
it's a bummer for Tommy. Um,
That's funny.
but no, Bob Gaudio is incredible, and so
Yeah.
just that this situation happened. So that's talked about by Jeffrey, because Jeffrey was there. I was so surprised. I was just thinking, oh, because I didn't know one way or another. Again, you can't find it on Google. You
He
know,
was new at that time. Yeah.
very new, and you didn't, and there's not enough information out there to know one way or the other. There's no books, or there may be a book touches on it, but there's no specific information as to whether or not Jeffrey Foskett was on a song, how much he was on a song, how the circumstances were that led to him being on it, why he was
Right.
there, all those things. And we get into all of that. And the other interview that is coming up with Jeffries, I've already did one with Stephen Gaines, the author of Heroes and Villains.
Yeah.
So I've got
Yeah.
that in the
Yeah.
pocket. That may be an
Wow.
online article, depending
That's
again
cool.
on space. But the other person I'm interviewing, and he has sent me so many good photos, candid backstage things and everything. Malcolm Leo, director of An American Band.
Oh, nice.
So
Awesome.
it's coming together.
Cool.
So we got
It's a full
Randy
circle story
Bishop,
there.
who wrote Chasing the Sky and that whole experience. Malcolm Leo directed An American Band. Jeffrey Foskett, who's on just about any recording we're talking about today,
Yeah.
and Stephen Gaines. So it's a whole nother. Again, it's so I've never had this kind of like filled up one edition and thought, okay, this is a 2-volume set. These are going to piggyback to each other and just talk
Right.
about this pocket of time.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. I've never I thought I'm not going to do a double issue, because then we get into all sorts. And if people say why not, I'll tell you why not. Postage.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why
Yeah.
not.
Absolutely. It's pricey quick. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the reason.
Well, just as a sidebar question, is Jeffrey Foskett doing okay? I saw he's doing better from what he's posted on Instagram and stuff. Is he doing
Yeah.
okay?
I asked him that towards the end of our Zoom. I said, Jeff, people are always asking about how you're doing, and I'll give you a somewhat canned, paraphrased response. and that is he continues. He says, I think he's said he's doing well, and it's because of those who help him at MD Anderson. So
Yeah.
that to me is kind of the root of the message. You know, thanks to MD Anderson and their research, and he's still on the trial. If
Hmm.
anybody's read any of the interviews that he has done, specifically, there's one out. If you do a Jeffrey Foskett, MD Anderson search on the internet, you'll find an article that he did. Um, and I think it was just last year that they had like MD Anderson's 60th anniversary, and he had a big concert. The Beach Boys played it. Stamos came
Right.
out.
Right. I remember that.
Um,
Yeah.
so that story is online, and I think in that there's more detail about Jeff's diagnosis. But the trial chemotherapy radiation treatments that he gets, the treatment that he gets, is still a trial,
Yeah.
and he's lived 5 years on this trial.
Yeah.
So that is information that I can say that in my talking to him on a Zoom, he was in great spirits, and
Good.
um,
I mean, because
that's
we all care about him. We all hope he's doing all right.
yes,
That's
yeah.
I know everyone watching would love to see that he's doing okay. Um, when it comes to the Beach Boys '85 album, did you pick that up right when it came out? Were you excited about it? Did you hear about it? Like, oh my God, new Beach Boys album. What was that like? Because I've only lived through one Beach Boys album, a couple, but like as a record buying person, it was only basically one. So I missed their entire career basically. So like, what was it like when that came out, and what was the response like? Do you remember talking to people about it?
I don't really. I didn't meet Lee Dempsey till the early around 90 or 91 or so, as I told you before at the record convention. So I didn't know many, or maybe
Yeah.
late 80s. I didn't know many other Beach Boys collectors. I
I feel like
really,
that's the case
I,
always. We don't exist in real life. We're just on the internet or
I
in
was,
stores.
I
Like,
was in search of Jan and Dean fans when I started getting into the stuff. I was like,
yeah.
is anybody like Jan and Dean? Jan and Dean, and I found there weren't many. Um,
No. Yeah.
and that was back around 1980. There
Yeah.
was no, um, and then I was just kind of I was trying to get everybody I knew and their mother
Yeah.
into the Beach Boys.
Been there.
I just love the Beach Boys, and it, when
Yeah.
and I think I know I talked about this in our first conversation. When that album came out, I wore it out.
Yeah.
I drove from one radio job to the other, listening to that cassette and just loving the shit out of it. I
Yeah.
just it had the there is no I don't other than I don't get chastised. I probably will anyway. I think one of the greatest opening tracks on any Beach Boys album is probably "Wouldn't It Be Nice."
Yeah.
In terms of you put the record on and then boom, you know,
Yeah.
just that
Yeah.
whoa, um, and then not just going whoa, and then hearing it over and over and over, and then knowing what's going to come when you know the
Still
album so
wanting it to
well,
happen.
and you
Right.
still
Right.
put it on, and it's still
Right.
amazing. But I will say that the Beach Boys '85 album has one of the best opening tracks
Absolutely.
of any Beach Boys album. Now, I'm not, again, even if I were to say, and I'm not saying this, let's be clear, that it has the same energy or impulse or whatever coming out of the gates as it Wouldn't It Be Nice, because it does not.
Right.
What it, but it's more of like a Do You Want to Dance off the Today album. Wasn't that
Yeah.
the opening track? You know, boom, do you want to dance? Right, just
Jump in.
boom.
Yeah.
And
Right.
it's just something and that it's that same, you know,
An immediacy.
yes, just it's the Beach Boys.
Right.
You want to sing along.
Yeah.
That
It
it's
grabs
just
you
that
into it.
simple. It's just that simple. And
It's yeah. An incredible opener. I mean, that drum beat is reminiscent of "Do It Again" almost, slightly. But you know, when it jumps in and you get that, yeah, you get the early '60s feel,
Yeah.
the falsetto vocal. It just feels like old but new at the same time, which is a perfect combination. It always works. It always works. Tom
Yeah.
Jones did it in the late '90s. It worked. Um, you know, when you have that combination, you're collecting old fans who have been there since day one, and new fans who are growing up watching MTV for the first time, seeing these videos on TV that were brand new. So I mean, my reaction when I first heard this album for the first time, I don't know when this was, probably 15, 16, 18 years ago, something like that. That song instantly grabs you. That heavy drum reverb, you're like you're sucked in because the feel is there. And then the vocals come in like, oh, it is a Beach Boys song. And then Mike is just perfect on those verses. It nails those verses. Um, and the choruses are very Beach Boysy. It's a Beach Boys song. So I mean it's great.
Yeah.
They nailed it with that one. They really did.
They did, and I think when we talked about this before, I mentioned the doo-wop, and I said it's like
Hmm.
it's "Don't Worry, Baby." The other song it's obviously akin to is "Do It Again,"
Yeah,
because
yeah,
that drum beat, that boom, boom, it's almost that reverb is almost intentional, almost like the "Do It Again"
right,
at the beginning.
right. Yeah.
And I don't know if Steve Levine did that on purpose. I don't know one way or the other, but it is certainly when you have Mike Love, because this was not a Mike and Brian track. This was a Mike and Terry Melcher track. This was the beginning
Right.
of the Mike and Terry Melcher
Yeah.
songwriting partnership. It's just so it is the quintessential lead track to a Beach Boys album, regardless of the year.
Oh, that's a good take. I
Because
can dig that.
what you want to get pulled in, right?
It
It's
does it.
again, if you just listen to the song and you just hear the song on the radio or on and you don't know the history of the Beach Boys, you don't know that Dennis Wilson isn't playing those drums, and you
Yeah.
don't know those things, and you're just listening to the music and just having the experience of being a part of making a connection to this is the Beach Boys. I love the Beach Boys. And
Right.
it's as simple as that. The thought process of, oh, Dennis isn't on this track. How sacrilegious. I will not listen, or whatever the take is.
Right.
That's not what this is. This is the joy of the moment of the experience either gets you or it doesn't. And boy,
And
it kicked my ass.
I can only imagine. I mean, it's always been a song that's caught my ear because it's nostalgic without being cheesy. It's
Mm-hmm.
real easy to go down that lane of just hokey, cheesy, haha, the '50s and '60s. Remember those that. But they take elements of what made those eras good, but then the way they deliver them is so smooth and there's wisdom in those voices. That's the difference. Like, because the lyrics aren't exactly, you know, Shakespeare or something, but
No,
it's
no.
makes you nerve because it's very digestible. It's boy meets girl, that kind of stuff. Easy. But the
Yeah,
way Mike delivers it hits home because you know his voice, you know how he sounded in the '60s, and he nails that sort of nostalgic but definitely now feeling, and that's can't get better than that.
that's right. And we're comparing this song, or we're thinking about this song. Don't Worry Baby came out in 63, 64,
Yeah.
and Do It Again came out in 68, June of 68, which was a purposeful nod back to the pre-Pet Sounds material.
Right. Right.
So again, we're making the connections that we're musically making here are two songs that sound pre-Pet Sounds.
Yeah.
So again, we're not saying that this is, people can't make the clarification. At no time did I ever think the Beach Boys '85 album was better than Pet Sounds. At no point did I think Get You Back was
Right.
better than Wouldn't It Be Nice.
Right.
It wasn't
Right.
that at all. It
Yeah.
was the joy of being in the moment of something really pleasing to listen to in its time.
Yeah. I mean, for me, because I was a kid when like the country album came out, and I was real little when Summer
Oh,
in Paradise came out. Like I wasn't
you
aware of.
poor, you poor thing.
I was like, I remember the country album coming out as a kid and seeing it in like magazines, being like, "What the hell is this album cover? I don't know what that is."
Yeah.
So when That's Why Got Me the Radio came out, that was my version of it. So that intro of dun, 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 for That's Why Got Me the Radio,
Yeah.
great opening song. So I get it. I get how it sucks you into that feel because they did the same thing on that song.
Well,
So
and
it's
they
like,
in many of their interviews promoting God, that's why God made the radio, is they went around and made the rounds. When I think it wasn't Mike the only Mike said it the most often, but I remember David and I think Al said it a number of times too. It's like going back to 1965. So again, in their
They all
minds,
said it.
they're
They all
going
said it. Yeah.
pre-pet sounds.
Yeah.
They're going back
Yeah.
pre-pet sounds, and they sounded like that because the album starts off with do 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 do. It's like,
Yeah.
come along, here we go again.
Remember those
One-
old days? Come
One
on, get back
last
in the boat.
time, one last, and then of course, the beautiful thing about That's Why God Made the Radio, by not by any means being the best album they ever did, but the great song is When You Get From There to Back Again.
That's
And
one of their best songs.
that song, just like Get You Back, that song exceeded all my expectations,
Yep.
and it blew my, it really, it, I was going to say blew my mind, but I think what it really did is it expanded my heart. I think
completely agree.
just in such a way that I said, man, there's elements of this song that remind me of something like Feel Flows or Long Promised Road. There's something so
Yeah.
existential in this in the execution of the track and Al's vocals and all of it. The whistle, whatever it is, it's just so otherworldly. It's really
I remember,
a beautiful track.
It really is. I remember they put that out as a teaser before the record came out. I remember playing it on some website, posted it before it came out. And I remember hearing it being like, oh my God, this is like the best Beach Boys song I've heard in a long time. And I made a video a couple of years ago, like my favorite underrated Beach Boys songs. And I put that at #1 because it really is a classic Beach Boys song. If that was the only song on the album, that'd be one of their best albums. I mean, hands down.
It should have been a single.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know
why it wasn't. I don't know why it wasn't.
Isn't It Time should have had a better chance as a single. That's a whole other discussion. But
yes.
So with Get You Back, I mean, you were definitely the MTV generation at that era. Do you remember seeing the video on TV?
100%, 100%. Very vividly. And it was just so perfect for the song.
It's a great video.
Because Mike's in the beginning of the video, and he's in the middle of moving. It looks like he's getting a divorce or something.
Yeah,
he's going somewhere with all his crap, and it's like, and he's singing like, "Where's my?" And the whole song's about reconnecting with an old girlfriend. Yeah. So here, he comes out and he's got all this stuff in his arms, so it conveys this, things are changing,
right?
And it works so well with the narrative of what the song's about. And it's an interesting song. I want to, how do I say this? I enjoyed the video.
Yeah.
I thought it was a little, goofy. It was a kind of goofy when they got to the love story focus on the one guy.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then he's out rolling around in a bubble in the ocean, and he's a nerd and he wants to get this girl.
Yeah.
So I liked the idea of the story because they were trying to visually convey something to go with the song. Right. But I liked the beginning of the video much better, where you were seeing Mike Love, looks like he just got kicked out of. It was almost like the beginning of the original Odd Couple with Tony Randall and Jack Klugman, where Tony Randall was walking down the street with all this crap in his hands because his wife kicked him out. So it had, but for me, that's my era, that had that vibe to it. And so, I was like, okay, where are we going here? And everything in those days, MTV was the thing, as much as 60s radio. Gary Griffin told me in I think it was 1965, he said, Dave, and I'm paraphrasing, I would turn on the radio every day, and it was the most amazing thing because you would hear something that was better than you heard the day before.
Imagine.
So that's what MTV was like at that time.
Cool.
Because MTV came out, now you remember, I don't know if you do, but I remember very vividly 1983 when Michael Jackson's Thriller came out, this 15-minute theatrical promotional film that was a mini film. that was this big. It was a big deal. It was Halloween, 1983, I think, because it was like aligned with Halloween. If
One of
I'm
the coolest videos
remembering
ever. Yeah,
correctly.
yeah,
So it was just big. Like, what
yeah.
is going on? You know, boom, 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 boom.
Vincent
I
Price,
was
man.
like, what is this? And it was amazing because it was like that showed everyone, including Prince or anyone else of that time, what you can do with theater and
Yeah, the
music.
importance of video. Yeah,
Yes, yes.
completely
So
changed everything. Yeah,
it sure did. So Michael Jackson was groundbreaking in that moment and for that medium. And
absolutely.
and so for me, just like Gary in 65 with the radio, for me to turn on MTV every day, it was all anybody could do to keep up with the latest and newest music video and the accompanying group and
Yeah,
the hit song on the charts. And in a lot of ways, groups would have hit songs on the charts because of the success of the video, which was a whole new
absolutely.
experience. It wasn't that way until MTV came on the scene. And then at some point down the road, VH1 became another vehicle for those things.
Yeah,
But MTV, when it broke, was just massive. It was
I
massive.
mean, I'm thankful that I grew up in a generation that where MTV still was playing music videos. They don't have to now because YouTube exists. So like the things change. But like, in the late '90s, early 2000s, it was still fun to watch MTV for all those videos. But like, because you have to remember too, that's the only place where you can watch things. The internet sucked back then. There was videos take an hour to load. That you had to rely on TV, so that's how it was. But um, speaking of videos, the second song on here, "It's Getting Late," also had a video, and it wasn't. It was a minor hit. It did okay for itself. Do you remember seeing that one on TV at all?
Yes, I do.
Wow,
Because
that's phenomenal.
I was ready for the next song.
Yeah,
Because Get You Back came out prior to the album. Then the album
right.
was released. Then It's Getting Late came out. And again, what was confusing to me, if you would be so kind to hold up that album, what are the songs that it tells you are on there?
Yeah. Okay, Get You Back,
Yeah,
California Calling, and
yeah,
She Believes in Love Again, which was a
yeah,
promo single. But
yeah.
yeah,
So why California Calling was not their follow-up single is still an unanswered question for me. But I'd like to know the answer, and I will try to get the answer because that to me was like A side, right? Get You Back, first song on side one.
yeah,
California Calling, first song side two. That
yeah.
made sense. And She Believes in Love Again would have been a great B side for the. And I don't mean that disparagingly. I mean that as a fact. It's a
Great song.
beautiful song,
It's a great song. Yeah, yeah.
but it's not to me. I don't see it as a. It's definitely a beautiful song. I don't see it as an A. Otherwise, it would have been placed different. It would not have been an album, side
Right,
one closer. It would have been
right.
placed different. And that album flows really well.
It
Uh,
does. Yeah,
and uh, and I think it's an underrated album to this day.
absolutely. Yeah. I
Um,
mean, the only thing I can add to not having California Calling as a single is that It's Getting Late sounds a little like Get You Back in terms of its production, whereas California Calling is almost like a sore thumb. It sticks out so differently from the rest of the
yeah,
songs. Like It's
yeah,
Getting Late for me sounds like the logical progression because I mean I wasn't there. I'm an outsider to this, but like to me it makes sense because you've got that amazing lead vocal from Carl. It's a punchy chorus. It sounds of its time. It doesn't sound nostalgic. It sounds very 80s to me, but
yeah.
in a very good way.
It's
So for
like
me, it makes sense.
yeah, no, It's Getting Late made sense because they brought back the actor and actress who played the
Right.
nerd and the girl.
Right.
It was a continuation of their story, which from
Yeah.
a thematic standpoint certainly was a choice since they introduced those characters in the those nondescript characters in the first video. And
Yeah.
I'll say in the Get Your Back video, Jerry Schilling is in it if you look closely. Um,
Is it
if
really?
yes, he is. Yeah, he's in the pool area
Cool.
around the built-in pool.
All right. I know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
you'll
Okay.
spot him. You'll spot him if
Yeah.
you look at that.
That's
And
funny.
and so and then surprisingly at the end of the It's Getting Late video was Brian Wilson shows up.
pops up at the end. Yeah.
And then he puts the shell to his ear and walks, you know,
And
I mean, it's
he's
pretty,
listening to California Calling, isn't he?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's like, so when I saw that video, I'm thinking, oh, California Calling is going to be the next.
Third, right.
It's
Right.
listed on the cover.
Yeah.
This is obviously, and Ringo Starr's on drums.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
would you not? Why would that not? And you have "Get You Back" is mainly it's a group song, but it's mainly Mike. It's Getting Late
Yeah.
is mainly Carl. So why not have a song that's mainly Al?
Yeah.
You know, just a nice
Next up.
Beach
Yeah.
Boys. And then they didn't do anything music video for the third release.
Yeah.
They just put the song out, and I don't know how it tracked. It was interesting because at that time in the Arbitron ratings and the way the demographics were measured, they had that "Get You Back" was a #1 hit on the adult contemporary charts, but not the
Yeah.
contemporary charts.
Right. Yeah. The
So that-
ACC. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So those other things, as the Beach Boys aged, they had a lot of hits. "Problem Child" was a hit
So weird.
on the adult contemporary charts. I mean, it
So
got
weird.
way up there, like 20 something, I think.
So weird.
In
Yeah.
Billboard, because I was working at radio at the time, and I went,
Yeah.
I was shocked. I'm like, how did it even get there? Who's listening to this?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
I've always liked it because it's Carl Wilson vamping. I mean, I would listen to him sing the phone book, so I just I don't care.
Whoever came up with that quote about the phone book all those years ago is a genius because they're completely true.
Yes. He could
You read a
sing
read
about a
journal
corn.
about
You could sing about a corn dog, and I'd listen.
yeah, how to make a cardboard box. So like, yep,
Yes.
I'm in. Sign me up. Like,
Yeah. Sure,
yeah.
I'll listen. Um,